Elizabeth Warren brought up her Native American heritage again in a Senate hearing. And Senator John Kennedy asked one question that shut the conversation down instantly. It was supposed to be about educational equity. Warren had the floor, the stats, the momentum. Then she said it again, the phrase she hadn't used in years. As someone with Native ancestry, I understand what it means to be left out. The room paused. Kennedy leaned forward. Senator, what tribe enrolled you? Warren blinked. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't smirking. He was just asking what no one else dared to. And when she couldn't answer, the room remembered. Drop your city plus age. This one gets uncomfortable fast. The committee hearing was halfway through when it happened. A panel on educational inclusion. The topic? Native American representation in public education policy. Senators took turns. Dry policy remarks. A few pre-written anecdotes. Some stats about rural broadband. Then the chair recognized Senator Warren. She adjusted her mic, smoothed her notes, and began calmly. For far too long, Native students have been underrepresented in everything from STEM to curriculum development. We have schools named after their tribes, but no teachers from them. She had a rhythm, familiar, calm, controlled. She cited reservation graduation rates, flipped through a few tribal literacy reports, and then she said it, not as a headline, not as a political play, just slipped in, as if the last decade never happened. As someone with Native ancestry myself, I understand the feeling of being counted out before you ever walk into the room. And the air froze. One staffer dropped his pen. Aide row went still. Even the stenographer hesitated, because no one expected her to go there again. Not after the NA test debacle, not after the Cherokee Nation letter, not after the SNL cold opens, the campaign walkbacks, the months of silence. But now, here it was, live, on the record. And Kennedy? He didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't raise a brow. He simply looked down at his notes, flipped one page forward, and underlined something. Warren kept going, unaware of the seismic weight of her sentence. I've lived with that experience of feeling invisible in places of power. That's why I fight for Native inclusion every step of the way. It was well-intentioned, it was emotionally toned, and it was a mistake. Because in that one line, I've lived with that experience, she reopened a wound the public hadn't forgotten. And Kennedy, he wasn't about to let it slide. Not with cameras rolling, not with the hearing live streamed, and not with a binder of tribal records sitting quietly under his chair. Warren concluded with a soft appeal to cultural belonging and yielded the floor. Polite applause, nods from her party, a couple staffers fist-bumped behind her. Then the chair cleared his throat. The senator from Louisiana is recognized. Kennedy leaned forward slowly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He tapped the mic once, looked directly at Warren, and without a hint of sarcasm or hostility, he asked, Senator Warren, would you mind sharing which tribe enrolled you? The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be, because they hit like a gong. Warren's jaw stiffened, just slightly. Kennedy stayed still. Calm, steady, no insult, no trap, just a mirror. The room didn't move, because the question wasn't cruel, it was clean. And for the first time in that hearing, Warren didn't have an answer ready. Not because she didn't want to speak, but because she knew the next sentence out of her mouth could rewrite the moment and again. Warren didn't answer right away. She opened her mouth, then paused, like someone mentally flipping through pages before speaking. Kennedy didn't press her. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached down slowly and pulled something from beneath his desk. A binder, burgundy, thick, tabbed in yellow. He placed it gently on the table in front of him and opened it to a bookmarked page. Now, Senator, he said softly, you mentioned Native ancestry. I respect that people can feel pride in their family stories. I surely do in mine. He flipped a page. But when it comes to public record, tribal citizenship isn't based on family lore. It's based on enrollment. The page in front of him had a simple title, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Official Tribal Rolls Crosscheck, Massachusetts Residents. It was recent, signed, stamped. Kennedy turned it slowly toward himself, running his finger down the margin as if double-checking a list he already knew by heart. I've got a certified list of Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, and Muskogee Creek Nation enrollees from the last 40 years. Your name, respectfully, doesn't appear. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't grandstanding. He was clarifying. In front of the entire nation, Joe, the line between identity and affiliation. Warren looked down at her notes, flipped one page, didn't speak. Kennedy let it hang, then added, "You also listed yourself as Native American in the Association of American Law Schools directory back in 1986, and as a minority faculty member at Harvard Law in the 90s. That information was used to tout diversity hiring, but again, no enrollment record. Still no interruption, no outburst, because truth doesn't need volume." He flipped one more page. It was a printed statement from the Cherokee Nation, dated 2018, publicly released. Kennedy didn't read it out loud. He just held it up. "This one says it better than I can." The quote in bold, "A DNA test is useless to determine tribal citizenship. Using a DNA test to claim connection to the Cherokee Nation is inappropriate and wrong." Warren finally looked up, and Kennedy's voice softened even further. "I'm not accusing you of anything malicious. I'm just saying, identity is more than ancestry. It's accountability, and in this chamber, our words have weight." That line hit hard, because for once, in a space filled with posturing and tribal politics, Kennedy wasn't making a punchline. He was delivering a boundary. Warren shifted in her chair, cleared her throat. I appreciate the senator's comments. I think we all carry family stories, and mine came from the people who raised me." Kennedy nodded slowly. "Mine too, but I never wrote them on a form." The room went dead silent, not out of disrespect, but because everyone, so from staffer to senator, realized what just happened. Elizabeth Warren tried to re-enter a door she once forced shut, and John Kennedy didn't slam it. He simply asked her to prove she had the key. The photo wasn't meant to be iconic. Just a still, one of hundreds captured by the freelance photographer seated 2 rows behind the panel. But sometimes timing catches more than lighting. The image, Kennedy holding up the binder, Warren looking down. No words, no motion blur, no drama. Just one senator asking, and the other processing. The caption was added later. 3 words. "No tribe found." It didn't come from a staffer. Didn't come from a PAC. It came from a random user on X who clipped the photo and added the phrase in white block letters. Within 6 hours, it had 8.2 million impressions. Not because it was harsh, but because it was true. For years, political operatives had danced around the Warren heritage saga, tiptoeing over it in debates, making it a punchline in memes, or ignoring it altogether during committee work. But now, one clean question, one public document, one paused expression, and the internet did the rest. TikTok users clipped the moment with side-by-side footage of Warren's past claims. "My mother told me we were part Native American. It's part of who I am. It's in my family history." Then they cut back to Kennedy's quiet inquiry. "Which tribe enrolled you?" The contrast was jarring. Not aggressive, not edited for rage, just placed side by side, fact beside feeling. And that's what made it devastating. Because Kennedy didn't deliver a zinger. He didn't need one. All he did was ask the question that had followed her for 10 years and never gotten a straight answer. The press didn't know what to do. Some outlets tiptoed around it. Senator Kennedy presses Warren on tribal identity and hearing. Warren revisits native claim, draws renewed scrutiny. Others leaned in. Binder shuts down Warren's heritage line in viral Senate moment. Kennedy asks one question. Warren's pause goes global. Late night host didn't joke. Not this time. Because there was nothing to punch down. Kennedy wasn't cruel. He wasn't mocking. He was methodical. And the country noticed. What once was labeled an old issue became again a present question. When do personal stories stop being private and start shaping public trust? Kennedy never tweeted the photo. He didn't quote it, didn't retweet it, didn't even mention it in press briefings. When asked by a reporter outside the Capitol, he gave a one-line reply. I asked what I thought voters had a right to hear. That's all. And that's what made the moment last. Because the silence that followed Kennedy's question said more than any soundbite ever could. The chair shuffled his papers, cleared his throat, then leaned toward the mic like a man trying to reclaim order without acknowledging the storm. Thank you, Senator Kennedy. We'll now move to questions for the second panel. But no one moved. No clatter of notes, no turning of binders, no shifting of chairs, because no one in the room was ready to move on. Warren hadn't responded, not directly, not yet. Her jaw was clenched, her hand tight on a page she hadn't turned in minutes. The moment was still open, and the chair knew it. He tried again. If there are no further comments from the members, we'll transition. Mr. Chairman, came a voice, not loud but clear. It was Kennedy, again. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't gloating. He just looked at Warren with something that surprised even his staffers. Patience. Senator Warren, would you like to clarify your earlier statement? Now the whole room exhaled, as if someone finally said what they'd all been thinking. Warren blinked, twice, then straightened her papers and adjusted the mic. I grew up hearing family stories. That's all I was referring to. I never claimed tribal membership in any official capacity that conferred benefit. A pause. Kennedy didn't respond immediately. He let her words hang, because even she didn't seem sure they were finished. Then he asked, well, would you agree then that claiming heritage in professional directories, even unofficially, can shape perceptions, especially around diversity hiring? Warren hesitated. I think it's fair to say, I could have been more careful. That was the line. That was her pivot. Not an apology, not a defense, just the softest admission that something wasn't right. The chair jumped in again, like a referee pulling fighters apart after the final bell. All right, thank you, senators. I believe we're ready to proceed. But the room still didn't breathe easy, because what had just happened wasn't political. It was personal, it was documented, and it was irrefutable. A woman who once positioned herself as a symbol of progress had just been asked to account for the story behind it. And for once, the story didn't hold. Backstage, a Democratic aide texted another. Why'd she say it again? We had this buried. The reply came instantly. She forgot the camera was still on. But it wasn't just the camera. It was the audience, the country, watching a senator who made her career on transparency struggle to be transparent about herself. And Kennedy? He wasn't angry, he wasn't righteous, he was just still. Like a man who'd seen this chapter before and decided this time he'd finish the page. It was 2 nights later, a small barge town in Massachusetts, a university gym transformed into a makeshift auditorium, plastic chairs, local press, student ID scanners. Senator Elizabeth Warren was back home, holding a routine student town hall. The tone was different, though. Gone was the usual energy, the warm applause, the quick-fire jokes. Warren smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Everyone knew why. The clip had gone viral. The photo had taken on a life of its own. And now, even on friendly ground, the questions had changed. She spoke for about 20 minutes, reiterating support for public education, community college investment, and Native scholarship programs. Polite claps followed. Then came the Q&A. First student, a softball about student loan forgiveness. Second, a comment about broadband in rural counties. Then came her. She looked no older than 20, black jeans, maroon hoodie, a backpack still slung on one shoulder. She stepped up to the mic and cleared her throat. Senator Warren, I'm part Cherokee. My mom's enrolled, my grandmother too. We live on tribal land. The room shifted. Warren nodded cautiously. I want to thank you for advocating for indigenous voices in education, the student continued. But I have to ask, she paused, do you understand why it hurt when you said you had Native ancestry again, without ever formally being part of us? You could feel the tension roll through the air. Warren's smile dropped. The young woman didn't stop. I know what it's like when people treat you like your heritage is just decoration, But when you say you understand our experience and you're not enrolled, not active in tribal life, it feels like you're borrowing pain you didn't earn. The gymnasium fell silent. No booing, no applause, just raw stillness. Warren took a step toward the mic, her hands clasped. I hear you, and I thank you for your courage in saying that. But the student pressed. Do you regret using that language again? Warren looked at her, really looked, then answered, yes, I do. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't elegant, but it was real. And in that moment, something shifted. Because a young woman, without a seat in Congress, without a camera crew, without a binder, had done what most of Washington couldn't. She had gotten an answer, not a deflection, not a policy sheet, just a sentence that took responsibility. Later that night, the clip made its way to C-SPAN's local affiliate, then to Twitter, then to Kennedy's desk. He didn't say much when he watched it, just sat quietly with his senior aide, then muttered, sometimes the best questions don't come from this building. And he was right, because it wasn't Kennedy who closed the loop on Warren's claim. It was the person it actually affected. And her voice wasn't loud, wasn't cruel, wasn't edited. It was just honest. And that's what made it powerful enough to finish what the hearing had started. It wasn't the town hall clip that changed things. It was what happened afterward. On campuses across the country, especially in schools with large indigenous student bodies, conversations ignited. But they weren't angry. They were reflective. Student unions posted the clip of the Cherokee student calmly confronting Warren, not to cancel her, not to shame her, but to illustrate something deeper. That for all the charts, hearings, and national speeches, accountability often comes down to a single, honest exchange. One viral caption from a Native student group read, "You don't have to hate someone to hold them accountable. You just have to care enough to ask." Across dorm room whiteboards, handwritten notes appeared. Don't speak for us, speak with us. One professor changed his syllabus mid-semester, adding a new lecture, Cultural Identity and the Danger of Political Shortcuts. But meanwhile, back in D.C., Kennedy was silent. His team had received hundreds of requests. Appear on Tucker Carlson, do a follow-up press conference, tweet a told you so clip, fundraise off the moment. He declined them all. When asked why, his press secretary gave the shortest briefing of the month. Senator Kennedy believes the exchange speaks for itself. He will not be adding commentary. Behind closed doors, an aide pressed him further. Senator, this is your moment. You asked the question the whole country had. Why not reinforce it? Kennedy looked up from his notes. Sometimes if you repeat the truth too many times, folks start thinking it's a weapon. And that was the difference. He wasn't out to win the story. He was out to clarify it. And that meant knowing when to speak and when to shut up. The student who asked the question at the town hall later posted a selfie. No hashtags, no slogans, just one line beneath the photo. Spoke my truth, she heard me, that's enough. That image traveled faster than the original C-SPAN clip because it showed the whole arc. A senator makes a claim. Another senator questions it. A young woman finishes the conversation. And the press, even they backed off. For once, no one wanted to overtalk the moment because it felt rare, unscripted, human. Kennedy never touched the quote again, never even mentioned the binder. Not because it wasn't useful, but because its job was done. The line he refused to repeat? Which tribe enrolled you? He could have built an entire media cycle on that question, but instead, he left it right where it landed. And by doing nothing else, he did everything right. Days passed, then weeks. The clip faded from trending tabs. Warren moved on to other issues: healthcare, banking reform, rural education. But something had shifted, not just in the polls, not just in pundit chatter, but in how people looked at her. For years, her story of Native ancestry had hovered at the edge of her identity, visible but unspoken, like a smudge on an otherwise polished record. But now it wasn't a punchline, it wasn't a headline, it was a question, a real one. Why did she bring it up again? What did she think it would prove? And why didn't she have the answer when asked? Not accusations, not outrage, just curiosity that cut deeper than outrage ever could. At a Boston book signing a month later, someone in the line handed her a copy of the photo, the one of Kennedy holding the binder and her looking down. They didn't ask for a signature. They just said, "I hope you explain this someday. I still believe in you, but I need to know." Warren looked at it, smiled faintly, then handed it back, unsigned, because she didn't have the explanation yet, and maybe she never would. Meanwhile, Kennedy, as usual, didn't bring it up again. He returned to committee work, filed a new amendment about farm subsidies, joked in an energy hearing about crawfish and carbon credits. But when asked off camera, in a hallway by a Capitol Hill intern, "Senator, do you think she lied?" He paused, then gave a reply that would never fit on cable news. "No, I think she believed a story that never got tested, and I think when someone finally did, it didn't pass." That's the sentence that never aired, but still made its way around Washington. Not as gossip, as a warning, because the era of unchallenged narratives was dying, and the era of receipts had arrived. One binder, one photo, one paused sentence, and suddenly the story that Warren once used to prove belonging became the moment that proved why evidence matters more than myth. And the last line of it all, it didn't come from Warren or Kennedy or the young woman at the town hall. It came from a tweet, quiet, small, from an anonymous account with a Native American flag in the username. It simply said, "We don't need apologies. We need honesty. And if you're not sure who you are, don't say it with a mic in your hand." No likes, no replies, but it was seen. And that was enough, because sometimes the most powerful thing a question can do is leave you still thinking about it, long after the answer never came. If more politicians ask questions the way Kennedy just did, calm, honest, and sharp, hit like, subscribe, and drop where you're watching from.